Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for choosing us today. It could have been anywhere, being that it's a Saturday, it's normally a weekend, we'll have plans. But the fact that you're taking time out to engage with us, I like to believe we have people from all walks of different countries, I presume. And I think it would be nice to actually also look at where people are signing in from. Yes. But thank you so much for joining us today. And we're just going to kind of understand and unpack exactly what it means, what strategies can you actually take up on in order to achieve success within your work life as well as your personal life. For me, I just want to kind of start with emphasizing the fact that in order to be successful in anything, you have to be willing to learn. Yeah? You have to be willing to learn because it's the learning that ensures your development and your growth. So whether it's in your personal life or your professional life, in terms of your personal life, you could be learning even from your parents. You could be learning from your work, from your environment, from your siblings who are older, from the community, or as far as your work life is concerned, you could be learning from your supervisors in terms of your line manager, or your bosses, or anyone who you're reporting into, or even people who are in different departments. So success for me comes from growth in terms of how have you grown within your work life and your personal life. And in order for you to achieve that growth, you have to be willing to learn so that you can then grow and eventually also develop. So today's presentation is primarily going to be focusing on the importance of personal and professional development. Okay, so by the end of this session, you should be able to invest in your personal and professional development in order to facilitate your career growth, your job retention, and also getting hired. You should also be able to set yourself apart from your colleagues, and you should be able to understand how you can be viewed as a key contributor to the business. So really what's really important is we need to grow as human beings. If we're going to be successful, if we're going to be better, if we're going to be great, we have to be willing to learn. And that learning is what is going to actually allow us to develop and to grow. So like a plant needs water to grow, people need personal development to grow as human beings. So you really need to really appreciate the importance of learning, because in order for you to grow, you really need to learn. Yeah? All right, moving on. Okay, so what is personal development? Personal and professional development. So it is, as the word says, personal. It is unique to the individual. It's really about you. It starts and ends with you. So I'm going to kind of help you identify exactly how you can go on about your personal journey when it comes to your development. But personal and professional development starts and ends with you. So it's really unique to the individual. It should help you become an improved version of yourself, because you're growing every aspect of your life. So you're growing your character, and you're also growing in other areas, yeah? So you become better and you become an improved version. It also helps you facilitate self-awareness by enabling you to know yourself better. So in order to understand what areas of development you need, you first of all need to identify who you are, what are some of your strengths, what are some of your weaknesses, in order to be able to identify some opportunities. And I'm going to go into detail about it on the next slide. But it facilitates self-awareness. Yeah? So only the best people actually work on themselves in order to be there. Yeah? So I want you to really understand the importance that it starts and ends with you. So we've created a checklist that should enable you calculate or work out your personal development journey, a way of reflection. Yeah. So in order to actually develop, first of all, you need to have ambition. You want to be able and willing to do it. You have to want to do it. No one is going to make you do it, because remember, I've already said it's unique to the individual and it starts and ends with you. So if you're waiting for someone else to actually do it for you, you might actually wait a very long time. So if you really want to move your life forward and you want to really be successful and be better, you have to take that choice to actually do it for yourself, not for your mother, not for your father, not for your siblings, not for your sponsor, not for the person who is paying your school fees, but for yourself, yeah? And you have to have a positive mental attitude. That's what we call PMA. You have to be willing to actually identify the positivity that allows you to flourish and become better. So you have to also start with why. You know, why are you doing this? What exactly am I doing? What is your mission? What is your life goal? If I'm going to be developing, or if I'm going to be looking to grow, what is it for? Why am I doing this? Yeah? So you have to be able to outline your life goal. What is it that you're trying to achieve? So for example, you're looking for a new job, or you're looking for that promotion within your workplace. What is it that I need to do to get into the new role, or to get into that promotion, to be able to be promoted into that role that I'm seeking? And that becomes your why. So the reason why you're doing it, your purpose for doing it is really, really important. So that's what you consider as your life goal. And if you're doing this, we're going to go into a bit of detail. When you're doing a personal development plan, that becomes the title at the top. What is it that you're trying to achieve? Say, I'm going to kind of give a little bit of detail for someone who's starting to get into a new job. So you have to look into what is it that, what does it take for you to be able to get into this new job? What is it that I'm supposed to be doing? So you just graduated, for example, and there's unemployment. And everybody said you need experience, you know? And it's really frustrating for every graduate. But you have to understand that we've all been in that position. There's no person who has not graduated and felt exactly what you're feeling. We have all been in a position where you finish school, you've put in so much time and effort, and you come out and you don't have a job and you don't know how to go about it. So if your why is to be able to get into employment, what exactly are you doing? What is the need that you're trying to achieve? And what actions and habits are you actually doing towards it? So if you're looking for a job, your CV, what does it look like? Yeah? Is it good enough? Because most people actually just do the basic. And it feels like you're waiting for someone to fix it for you. But it comes down to you. You know, what help are you seeking? Have you spoken to any recruiter? Have you received any guidance on how to actually better write your CV? Because most of the times, you're looking at a CV based on what everybody is telling you. But I always tell people, when you're writing a CV, you should always bear the reader in mind. Not yourself, but the person who is going to read it. So what does the market say in terms of how the CV should look like? Does your CV reflect that? You know, you need to consider your needs and what actions you're actually taking, what habits are you taking as a job seeker? You know, where are you going to actually seek for these job vacancies? How often are you actually reading the paper when the job opportunities do show up? I always get a myth when people say that most of the jobs that are being advertised are dummy jobs, but that's not true. It's actually false. Because you have to think about it, recruiters or companies have to pay for advertising space. So why should I incur that cost as an organization just to put out a dummy job? Yeah? So how often are you actually looking at the papers? What jobs are you actually applying for? How often are you going to those company websites? So again, you need to think about what actions that you're taking, what habits that you're actually implementing in order for you to achieve your why. Yeah, then you have to look at your self-awareness in terms of doing a SWOT analysis. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And the opportunities and threats. So when you're doing your self-analysis, I know we come from a culture where it's almost like it's talked down onto when you know yourself. You know, I'm going to use vernacular where people say, "Where man," you know what I mean? It's like self-awareness is not promoted, and yet you have to be aware in order to identify, these are the things that I'm good at, these are the things that I'm not good at, and how do I actually fix those gaps? So I want us to change our mindset and shift from making it seem like when you're self-aware, it's a problem. It's actually a good thing because it's knowing what your strengths are that you'll be able to identify the opportunities and use those strengths to capitalize on those opportunities. It's knowing your weaknesses that you'll actually be able to work on them. Yeah? So if I'm going to analyze myself, for example, what are some of my strengths? I'm hardworking, yeah. I'm very motivated. I don't need people to motivate me. There's a whole lot of self-motivation in me. I'm very results-oriented. I like things to get done to finish. So you have to look into yourself and be able to write down what your strengths are. And I would encourage you to take a pen and paper and write things down. Look deep inside yourself and be honest with yourself and identify what your strengths are. And then if you're looking at your weaknesses, ideally you should really kind of look at your actual weaknesses. Most people actually think that when recruiters ask or employers ask for weaknesses at interview level, at interview stage rather, they're looking for you to talk about, I always hear, you need to identify a strength that looks like a weakness. That is wrong. So I'm here to correct most of those assumptions that you actually have. What they're looking at when someone asks you what your weaknesses are, they're looking for you to be honest with yourself because no man is perfect. We all have our things that we are not good at, but they're looking for you to be able to, first of all, be aware that you have a problem, but most importantly, that you're working on that problem, yeah? And you're figuring out either how to manage it or how to actually deal with it so that it's not a problem, so that it does not get into your way. Like for me, one of my weaknesses is I'm very impatient when it comes to time, yeah? The most important thing to me as Halima Muhamed is my time. The most valuable thing is time, my time. So what really frustrates me is when people take that right away from me and like to use my time as they so much fit. So it becomes a weakness because of how I react when people actually do that, yeah? So it is a weakness. I've identified it in terms of the fact that my reaction or how that makes me feel is not very tolerable. So I have to now identify ways to manage it. And I do. So what I normally do is when I'm talking to people or if I've made appointments with someone, I normally highlight my expectations to them. So if I'm, for example, made an appointment, I would say to you, I would appreciate it if you actually communicate if you're running late. Because to me, what that tells me is you respect my time. What I don't want to happen is for me to sit there for 30 minutes or even an hour not knowing what's happening. For me, what that communicates is you're not valuing me because you're not valuing my time. It's that personal to me. So the best way for me to manage it is to be able to manage my expectations with people. So you have to be able to identify what your weaknesses are and be able to appreciate how you deal with them. I was talking to a young student who was really ready to go into an interview and she said she has a bad temper. And I said there's nothing wrong with you having a bad temper, but how do you deal with it so that it's not an issue, walking away. So if you're in the middle of a heated argument with someone, tell them it's getting bad and I'm going to walk away. Just say it out loud so that they know. So when I come back, we can be able to tackle this and walk away because that's your way of managing your weakness. And it's in order to be able to identify the opportunities in front of you, you have to really tap into your strengths. So it's your strength that will actually allow you to capitalize and cultivate any of the opportunities in front of you. And then when it comes to threats, there's going to be things you can control, there's going to be things you cannot control. So some of the things we can control is going to be maybe people's opinions. Someone is going to come and tell you something that does not resonate well with you, but you have to make the choice whether to listen to them or not. Yeah, that's a threat. It's just your opinion at the end of the day. And then there's something that we cannot control. For example, what's happening right now, we've been hit by a crisis, an epidemic of coronavirus. You cannot control that. But how are you able to tap into your strength in order to renovate yourself and be able to identify opportunities within what's happening so that you can actually thrive and not necessarily lose out or feel some type of way. And I'm not saying that we're not going to feel some type of way. I think every single human being has been affected by COVID-19 in any way or somewhere or another. But you cannot allow yourself to stay in that space for so long. You know, it's okay for you to feel some type of way, to be in your feelings, to be in your emotions, but don't stay there for so long. Pick yourself up, look to the positive side. That's why we started with. You have to have a positive mental attitude. You have to force yourself to look for something positive to cultivate on. Yeah? And then how, exactly what avenues are you actually going to utilize? When it comes to personal and professional development, you can consider, in terms of professional development, you can consider going for academic courses, like really, Dorothy kind of highlighted what Unicaf does. There's a lot of courses that are online. So you can look into maybe doing an online course or going back to do your master's, or maybe venturing into a different degree in case you didn't like the one that you actually did the first time. You can consider reading books. I don't read books anymore. I used to read books in terms of paperback, but I don't have the time anymore. So what I do is I listen to audiobooks. So you can either do paperbacks or do audiobooks. So me, I learned through reading books that are recommended to me. YouTube is I'm a religious YouTube user. And I think we're in a generation where there's a whole lot of content out there that's available to us. It's just a matter of selecting what exactly am I focusing my attention on. You know, I'm not saying don't socialize or don't use YouTube for socializing, but what habits do you have? What actions do you have that contribute to your personal development? One of my habits that I have I wouldn't say every morning, every now and again in the morning, before I get out of bed, when I'm struggling to get out of bed, I go onto LinkedIn and I start reading articles, or I listen to something by Evan Carmichael on YouTube. So in the morning, that's like my practice. Not every morning, but most of my mornings. So at least I feel I have to account myself, what value have I put into myself today? So you have to do the same thing. What other avenues can you do? You have to also think about your health, your fitness. A lot of people consider meditation. You also have to think about your mental health. How are you making sure that your mental health is actually good? I realize that most of us were cut off from the social aspect of our life with COVID-19. How else are you maintaining that social space to ensure that your mental health is intact? How often do you talk to other people? You also have to consider having a personal development plan. Personal development plan is it's primarily about, and you can either do a professional one, or you can even do something simple for yourself. So if you really want us to kind of engage in how to do a professional personal development plan, please get in touch with us. But the key essence of having a plan is really to ensure that you have things written down and you hold yourself accountable to the actions that you've actually taken. Yeah? So like I said at the beginning, when you're starting with your why, that forms the beginning of your personal development plan. And then you're able to navigate exactly how am I going to go about this. And when you're setting goals, you have to make sure that they are specific, they are measurable, they are attainable, they are realistic and time-bound, which is the affirmation of SMART. You have to make sure that you're setting clear, SMART goals. Yeah? And it's also important that you set boundaries. You have to really be willing to set boundaries so that you can manage your own personal and professional development. Also ensure that you're healthy. Like for example, as I've mentioned to you, one of my boundaries when it comes to my time management is if I'm expecting you after 30 minutes and you're not there, I'm going to leave. And I'm going to tell you, if I'm not able to get to you, I'll send you a text message and say, I'm going to be waiting 30 minutes after that. That's a boundary that I have set to tell people that you're not going to waste my time. So what are some of the boundaries that you're going to set for yourselves to allow people to know how to treat you so that they are able to appreciate your process and not really kind of take away from it? And when it comes to time, like Dorothy mentioned in the beginning, how much time do you actually give when it comes to your personal development? Professional development, normally courses kind of dictate how much time you do it. So if you're doing the course at the beginning, you know how long it's going to take. It could be maybe a month, or it could be just there and then, like today. After today's session, you'll be done, and Unicaf is going to send you a certificate that you can add. So when it comes to your professional development, the law is to tell you how much time it's going to take. So the courses, a PhD, I don't know, how long does a PhD take? About 4 years. About 4 years. A master's, some of them take 1 year, others take 2 years. A degree takes 3 years. So when it comes to professional development, there is always a designated time that you're going to have to use. But personal development, it comes down to you. You have to decide. And that's where most of us actually fail ourselves. And you have to be willing to invest in yourself and get out of your own way. So I would say start with 10 to 15 minutes a day. It could be either in the morning, it could be in the evening. I normally do a lot of when I'm listening to my audiobooks, because I live far, I do it when I'm driving. So in the morning while I'm driving to work, that's when I actually play the volume with something, so that I have something going inside with some energy. So you have to decide what time is appropriate for you and how much of it. And you have to start small. Like I said, you can start with 10, 15 minutes a day, and then build up to that depending on how you feel. But the key is you have to be consistent. You have to be as consistent as possible. I'm not saying do this every day, because some days you're going to wake up and life happens. Honestly speaking, life does happen, and you're just not in that headspace. But I would encourage you to find some time for yourself. You have to choose you over anything and anybody. And that's not selfish, it's actually self-care, it's self-love, and for me, it starts and ends with you. You have to decide what's right for you. So again, when it comes to your development, make the time for yourself. Don't give yourself to everybody else and make sure that everyone is entitled to your time, but you're not actually avoiding yourself of your own time. So it starts with you, and then everything else should follow. Next slide. Okay. So, how do you ensure one of the key components of personal and professional development in relation to your career growth, your job retention, and making sure that you get hired? So the first thing that I really need to emphasize, and I'm going to continue emphasizing it, so that if there's nothing you take out of my session today, you should be able to take the fact that only you are responsible for your learning. Yeah. So the first thing that I need to talk about, to kind of emphasize, re-emphasize, is that you need to own your own learning. You have to be able to take the responsibility for yourself, And I think that I'm going to kind of highlight it when I talk about the 70-20-10 model. So the 70-20-10 learning model emphasizes the fact that 70% of our learning happens on the job. 70%, I'm going to say that again, 70% of our learning actually happens on the job. 20% of our learning happens through mentorship. So coaching and mentorship contributes to 20% of our learning. And then 10% of our learning actually happens in your classroom. Yeah? I know it's a very, very surprising thing. Every time I say it, everybody gets surprised, because everybody is continuously asking for the 10%. The 10% that happens in the classroom. So that could be training courses that you attend to, or academic courses that you're actually engaging in. But please understand that they contribute to 10% of your learning when it comes to your career growth. So 70% of the learning happens in the workplace, 20% is through your mentors and coaches, and it would be ideal to learn to know how many people actually have coaches and mentors. You'll be surprised that a lot of people don't actually consider it. So for me, what's really important is to emphasize the fact that we have to be able to own our learning, even in the workplace. And I want to address that. Now, most of the time when you're in the workplace, it's very easy for you to ask your employer to actually invest in your learning. But I need you to understand that your employer is only going to be willing to invest in your learning if A, you've identified that learning yourself. So there will be tools within the organization. So for example, if you're in an organization that carries out performance reviews, so in your performance review, you'll be able, whether it happens once a year or twice a year, you'll be able to assess yourself. Well, the procedure requires you to assess yourself first. Yeah, again, it starts with self. You understand? So then the next is your line manager then assesses you. So in that assessment, then you're able to kind of marry the two assessments and see if what your line manager is saying is true, if what you're saying about yourself is true. And it's supposed to be a discussion where everybody now contributes to it through evidence. Yeah? And then when it comes to the organization, they are able to identify what the training needs are within from each individual. Because performance reviews actually happen with your line managers. So it's the line manager who's going to then dictate to the organization if there is a need for learning. So I want to also emphasize that, because Dorothy asked at the beginning, who is responsible? Is it the employer or the employee? The greatest responsibility lies with you. The employer is going to be willing to invest in you if they identify, A, that you'll be able to contribute by bringing whatever it is that you're learning into the organization, and B, if that, you have to create a business case. How is your learning or that investment going to contribute to the business? So the only time they're going to contribute towards your learning or pay towards that is if that development is going to help the business become better or grow. And you also have to be willing and be able to demonstrate, which is why I'm going to talk about the return on investment later on. You have to be able, if someone has invested in you, or if the organization has invested in you, were you able to demonstrate a return on that investment? Yeah? So I want you to urge you to kind of be responsible for your learning, in the sense that 70% of it happens in the workplace. Now, we're in a space where COVID-19 is actually ongoing, and we're not having enough time to interact, which kind of takes away from your 70% learning space. But I would still encourage you to identify with the people who you can learn from, and also be respectful of their time. The most ideal way to learn in the workplace is to sit by name. You know what we, in HR, we call it sitting by name, whereby you're sitting next to the person who you're actually trying to learn from. And they have to be willing. So you have to be willing to ask them, and you also have to be willing to actually accept, which again comes down to your relationship management skills. If you don't have good relationships with the people that you're working with or your superiors, they will not be willing to actually give you any time. So it's really important that you cultivate those relationships so that essentially when you need to learn from someone, they will be willing to allow you to actually learn from them. And as I said before, the best way to learn is to just sit next to someone and observe. Yeah, so you have to be willing to listen and be observant as well, and have a note and pen, not have a notepad and pen so that you can write out any things. Now, the challenge when it comes to on-the-job learning is that most people are doing their work. So as much as they're trying to learn from me, I have a work in front of me that I need to actually get on with. I have deadlines to meet. And I would encourage you not to interrupt that flow. Because when you're just sitting, all you're doing is learning. If you're observing and you're quiet, so you have to just literally be there like a phone, you know, like a statue, and allow them to do your work, but then pay attention to what they're doing and make some notes. Then whatever it is that you don't understand, make notes of it and ask for their time so that essentially you can kind of go through it together. That is how learning actually happens in the workplace. And I would also encourage employers to have a culture, a working culture, a learning culture where they encourage this to be ongoing. It also actually allows people to grow, because most of the time you will find that employers go outside to look for talent instead of inside. So opportunities are continuously showing up inside, but they're actually bringing people outside to take them up. It's because they have not identified talent within inside, simply because the people inside have not demonstrated that they can actually do the job. Yeah? It's also important, there are some roles that are technical, so you have to be willing to invest in yourself in terms of technical skills for the role. Every role has its own technical skills. For example, as an HR professional. Some of the technical skills, we have recruitment, we have performance management, we have employee relations. So what are some of the technical skills that are required for the role? And do you actually have those skills? How have you actually acquired those skills? It's really important. I think it's very natural for all of us to always think that we should go to the 10%, we should go to the employer and ask them to take you for a course or some sort of training. And yet most of the time, it's not some of the things that you actually need to learn. You can learn them from your colleagues, yeah? So the responsibility can be shared with the employer, but only if you demonstrate what value you're going to bring to the organization after that. Professional development is typically about academics in terms of how do you gain the professional learning about the area or the career that you're trying to actually specialize in. So professional development, for me as an HR practitioner, I expected to have CIPD, which is Chartered Institute of Professional Development, and that's a certification that is required as an HR practitioner. So accountants probably need, they most definitely need CPA or SCCA, and in Uganda now it's a requirement for you to actually have CPA, especially for banking. It's a requirement. So you have to know what field of study that you're in and what is required of you. So I would encourage people to consider professional development, and Derek is going to dig deeper into that in terms of what Unicaf offers. And again, I want to speak to the whole entire myth about the importance of master's degree. A master's degree is not a requirement, it is an added advantage when you are at the beginning of your career, yeah? When you are at the beginning of your career, the requirement for you to get in is for you to actually have a BA, yeah? But as you progress through your career and you go to the top, the requirement changes. It now becomes a master's degree. So you will not head a department without a master's degree. You will not become a director without a master's degree. You will definitely not be in my position without a master's degree. So I want people to really understand that when you're making the choice to do a master's degree, don't look at the now. You probably will not get immediate value, but it will save you a lot of time when you're way up in your career. If you're up for a promotion and you can't get it because you don't have a master's degree, and the requirement for that job is for you to actually have one. So I need you to kind of manage your expectations from the beginning when you're making the decisions that you made. I wouldn't call it lucky, but I was encouraged by my mom right from the very beginning of my career. I went from BA and I went ahead and did my master's and my certification immediately. And the reason why I did that was so that I could get it out of the way. So now that I'm building my career, I don't have to consider or think or worry about my professional aspect because that's already there. So I don't have to ever go back. So it's really, really important when you're making these decisions for yourself, when it comes to your professional development, at what point do you actually go for it? We are now in a space where COVID-19 is actually ongoing. There seems to be a lot of time. The world has actually slowed down. Maybe it's the time for you to actually think about doing your professional development and consider doing that master's that you've been trying to do for a very long time, or that PhD for people who actually want to get into the PhDs, or any other professional course. I would definitely encourage you because at the top of your career, you have to get to a point where it balances out. At the moment, it might not necessarily balance out, but I'm going to emphasize this: when you go up in your career, it's going to become a requirement. Right now, it's considered an added advantage to have a master's degree. But when you progress to your career and you're looking to become a head of a department, it's going to become a requirement. I also want to talk about what skills, the importance of working experience, the importance of ensuring that you have the skills that are required, that you have the capabilities to do the work, and you actually have the competencies And again, this is really key because when you're coming into a job, they are assessing your competences, your key competences for the role. And these are actually outlined in the job description. It's not word to word. Some of them are actually outlined by word, but some of them are just within the sentences. So it's important for you to look at the job description and understand. And when you're in your workplace, how are you able to actually grow and be able to obtain the skills and capabilities and also establish the competences for the role? If you're working towards gaining a promotion, you have to have done the job that you're doing at the moment and have also demonstrated that you can do the job that you're seeking to be promoted in. Because no employer is going to employ someone who does not have the skills to do that actual job. They're not always willing to invest in people in terms of training. They want someone who's going to come in and hit the ground running. So if you don't have the skills, the capabilities, and the competences required to do the job, chances are you're not actually going to succeed in getting it. Career guidance is really important, and you have to be willing to have these discussions. Most people don't identify the importance of career guidance, and they seek it through their friends and their families, people who have no professional experience in identifying what's happening in the market. So as a result, they can't really guide you. And more than half of the time, they're guiding you based on their own experiences and not necessarily what's in your best interest. So I would encourage you to seek out career guidance. The fund is primarily focusing on that. We are a career guidance organization that focuses on allowing people to maximize their potential by guiding them in the right directions. Some organizations actually allow for career guidance to happen in terms of your discussions, and they actually allow for you to have a professional development plan, but not every organization does. So if you're an organization that doesn't, that's why we are here to help you so that you're able to maximize your potential. You also have to think about getting coaches. Yeah, coaching and mentoring is really, really important. When it comes to your learning, as I said, it contributes to 10-20% of your learning. So if I was to ask how many people actually have mentors and how many mentors do you actually have, you'll be amazed that most people don't actually have mentors. But then if they are if the learning model says that they contribute 20% of your learning, I think you need to now rethink that. Now, most people don't understand, how do I actually pick a mentor? A mentor is supposed to be someone who has done what you're actually aspiring to do. Someone in terms of your career, say for example, you're trying to be an HR, you're pursuing a career in HR that should be at the top of their career when it comes to HR. So maybe an HR manager or an HR director, someone who has actually done what you're aspiring to do. Should be one of your mentors. And then another one doesn't have to necessarily be in your area of specialization. So you should always have at least 2 mentors or more. I personally have 3 mentors. Yeah. And also, there should be also people that you aspire to. You know, my greatest inspiration is actually Oprah Winfrey and Maya Angelou. You know, because I like the way that their journeys have actually been mapped out. As you can see, there's a difference between Oprah and Maya Angelou. So there should also be people that you actually aspire to generally in life, you know, and you can actually look at some of the content that they have actually contributed to their success. So Oprah is a billionaire for crying out loud. Maya Angelou's contribution is really well known. So look for inspirational people who don't just inspire you because you want to be like them, but they inspire you in the sense that whatever content they put out, you can relate to, you can identify with, it can actually be added as part of your development, and you can learn from them. And most importantly, that they are verified, they are validated in terms of what their contribution has been. When it comes to the mentor who is not in the workplace, it's ideally the same person. My other mentor specializes in IT and finance, ironically. But he's also an entrepreneur. So anything to do with anything in life, that's where I go to. And I think the most ideal thing is to be able to bounce the ideas off of each other. So if your mentor from your workplace or your school is telling you this, you're able to kind of voice their opinion, which this other mentor will see, and then you find a landing in the middle. It doesn't necessarily mean that everything they tell you should do. You should have the capacity to make your own decisions, but your decisions should be informed decisions whereby you've been informed by these two people who know better than you, that you're able to be in a position where you can now make a decision that is more informed. Networking is really, really key. Again, when you're networking, it's really about the people who you surround yourselves with. You know, you are as strong as your company. I think there's a quotation that I like that says, if you are the smartest person in the room, then you're in the wrong room. You know, and what that really means is you're not going to learn from anybody in that room, and everybody else is learning from you. You know, so if you are the smartest person in the room, I mean, it might boost your ego and makes you feel good, but it doesn't actually add anything from you. So what I would encourage people to do is to kind of grow their networks. What does your social capital look like? And again, it comes down to your ability to cultivate relationships. How good are you at relationship management? And those are the networks that you actually grow. So you have to identify friends who you can be friends with, but also can contribute to your growth. So you are as strong as the people that you surround yourself with. So that's really the importance of networking. Okay, so how do you set yourself apart from your colleagues? We are all different by default, definitely, but the employer's objective is really to identify if you can actually do the job. So can you do the job? I've already spoken about the importance of skills, abilities, and qualifications. But will you do the job? So can you do the job? It comes down to your strengths in terms of your skill set, your abilities, your qualifications. But will you be able to do the job? That comes down to your interest, your attitude, and your motivation. Will you be able to do the job? Attitude is really, really key in an organization. People really want to see how good you are. Can you go the extra mile? Will you be able to stay outside of working hours, or are you just going to give the bare minimum? And I always tell people that someone is always watching. You know, you're always thinking, maybe I do this or I do this, but someone is always watching. So it's the things that you do that will actually contribute to, if those opportunities come up for example, promotion, you're going to be the one who's going to be considered. How will you fit into the organization? That comes down to your personality. I always tell people this, that most of the time when you're faced with two people, when you're interviewing and you're faced with two people who are technically strong, the reason why you choose one over the other comes down to their personality. So if your personality is not fully developed, you're already doing yourself a disservice. How articulate are you? How can you actually speak? How can you communicate? All those things that are individually based. You know, sometimes your articulacy comes from the books that you read, the type of content that you consume. So if you don't work on that and kind of be able to demonstrate that, and it just comes off naturally, unfortunately. So if you're not able to come off in that way, you're going to lose out. So the employer is going to choose someone over you. Yeah, so it's really important that you're able to establish your personality and that you shine. Because at the end of the day, if I have two people who are technically strong, the reason why I'm going to pick one over the other comes down to their personality. And if that personality can fit into my organization. So if I have a team where I have, two assertive people, I don't need a third one. So I might select, I might say, I'm not taking you, and you're actually good, but you're not going to actually suit my team because I already have two of you. I don't need another third one. So I might find someone who's maybe an introvert, but is also excellent. Yeah. So please look at your personalities and figure out how, and take whatever information that we are giving you today to be able to become better and to grow. So, how can you become a key contributor? So this is actually determined by the employer, and it's determined by the employer depending on the impact that you're actually making, the direct impact and your contribution. What type of value are you adding to the organization? I keep telling people, if you're not missed when you're gone, then you need to reevaluate what value you have to the business. Yeah, if your absence is not felt, if you're just irreplaceable, then you need to reconsider. You have to look deep into yourself and say, okay, so what is it about me that anyone can think they can just replace? So you have to ensure that you add value to the organization. What contribution are you actually giving to the business? Businesses are all about, we're all trying to make money, So how is your value quantified? And for me, that's really, really important. Some of the questions that you need to ask yourself while you're considering how to become a key contributor is, what does your line manager say about you? Now, line managers are the people who are actually responsible for our careers in the workplace, because they can either make you or break you. And sometimes organizations don't necessarily invest in time in training line managers and how to manage people, but that's not really an issue that you should use as a reason. So for me, it's really important to ensure that your success or your brilliance is not determined by your line manager, in the sense that if I don't have a good manager, it means I'm also not going to be good. I'm not saying go and outshine your master, You're not expected to outshine your master. You're actually expected to make your master look good, So your line manager, your job is to make sure that you make them shine. You're supposed to actually make sure that your line manager looks good. And if they're happy, then that reflection actually will also work for you. I'm not saying go and be unprofessional about how you do things. All I'm saying is make sure you do your job and make sure that your line manager is happy with how you're doing. So how often do you actually have one-on-one meetings with your line manager in terms of asking them to give you feedback on how you're actually contributing or what your performance is? Don't actually, for me, I think we are in most organizations out of observation in Uganda are very driven in terms of money, like what is your contribution to organization, but because again the importance is for you to be responsible for your own learning. So if you're waiting for your line manager to sit you down and give you a reflection of how you're performing, you might wait a long time. What I really want you to equip is the power to be able to ask, and the confidence to be able to say, you know what, is it possible we can have a one-on-one meeting so that you can tell me how I'm performing, so that you can actually give me some feedback? Own your own learning, own your own mischief, so that you know how to fix them. So it's important for you to understand and appreciate what your line manager says about you, and you won't know until you actually ask them. What does your performance review say about you? You've already kind of gone into that. If you're in a space where you work with an organization that it's not in their policy to do performance evaluations, then again, if you have that one-on-one with your line manager, it should be able to kind of set the pace on what is happening, and you can have a wider conversation in terms of how that can then contribute to your development in terms of your career, and how the organization can actually contribute to that. Are you able to meet your KPIs? The organization, again, if they're able to do performance evaluations, your KPIs is your key performance indicators. They're normally given at the beginning of the year, whereby they are cascaded right from the organization strategy down to the department, all the way down to the manager, to the individual, so that it's clear what your contribution, your direct contribution is to the business. So if you have that conversation with your line manager and you're not able to meet your KPIs, I don't think you're going to be viewed as a key contributor. So in order to be viewed as a key contributor, you have to be willing and able to meet your KPIs. And if you're having challenges throughout the year and you're not able, that maybe are hindering you to be able to meet your KPIs, what communication have you actually made with your line manager? I would really urge everybody who is in employment to establish a good relationship with their managers, because like I said, they can make or break you, because all of this is actually about, it kind of ties into them, yes? So have you demonstrated a return on your investment? As I mentioned before, a company is going to invest in you if you're actually able to create a business case that their investment will be felt, and that contribution will actually be identified. What contribution have you actually made for business? So if I've taken you for training, if I've paid for your CPA, if I've paid for your masters, how has that been brought back into the organization? So have you demonstrated your return on investment? How are you able to demonstrate that? Again, those are conversations that I had with your line manager. They will be able to actually guide you and actually guide you on how you can make sure that that contribution is actually felt. Then are you in a critical role? Now, critical roles are the roles that are critical to the business. And again, those are determined by the organization. So, for example, a hospital cannot do without doctors. Yeah, so a doctor is in a critical role. So, are you in a critical role to the organization? And if you are, is your presence actually felt? In other words, if your absence is not felt, your presence is probably not going to be appreciated. But it's those people who are in critical roles that most organizations actually invest in. Yeah? So in conclusion, I want us to be able to change our mindset. Again, like I said to you, if there's anything you should take away from today's conversation, is the fact that you should be responsible and you should own your own learning. It should start with you. Whatever responsibility that you want the employer to take, they will not really support you until you go and have a conversation with them. And again, you have to be willing to have a business case. A business case means you have to go and demonstrate that if you put money into this, for example, for me, there was a time when I needed to do social media training because as part of my KPI is to be able to true enough to be known publicly using social media. So before I was doing it, I didn't have any training. But because it's part of my KPI and it's a skill that I felt I was not strong at, I was able to demonstrate the value and requested for the training. So you have to be able to demonstrate to the employer that you need the training because it's going to contribute A, B, C, D, and D to the business. That's really, really important. Again, it starts with you. You have to stop sitting around waiting for the employers to come to you. You have to go to them and be able to kind of create your business case in order for them to consider investing in you. So you have to really change your mindset and be able to grow a growth mindset. Like I said, learning happens every day. And in order for you to grow, you have to be willing to learn. But what exactly are you learning and who are you learning from? You have to validate your sources of information. If the source is not valid, please don't consider it. And then my concluding remark is do not let your entertainment budget be more than your personal development budget. You should invest in yourself. Thank you for listening.